Hi, I'm Gavin Lockyer, the Managing Director of Arafura Resources Limited, ASX code ARU. We're developing the Nolans Neodymium-Praseodymium rare earth mine in Central Australia. And I'm here to tell you today about some of the developments that have been occurring in our company.
Lovely to see you, Gavin. We saw you back at the end of June. The reason I called, share price up 9-10 cents in the last just over a week or so. What's going on?
Look, there's, I think, a realisation, particularly in the auto sector, that, the semiconductors have been an issue in terms of shortage of supply. And last year it was neodymium-praseodymium. And I think now that a lot of the Europeans have come back from their summer holidays, they're now starting to set their procurement strategies for the next few years, particularly in these critical minerals. And so we're getting a lot of interest out of the EU in particular, but also out of South Korea and Japan. And I guess it was all just topped off by a nice article that Bloomberg wrote last week that was released in Germany in the auto sector about this very shortage.
Okay. So
bringing renewed interest.
Yeah. So the Bloomberg, they're a bit late to the party, but very, very powerful. If that's the cause of it. I thought it might be the fact that the Aussie government have announced $2 billion to help rare earth projects in Australia. That must have something to do with it.
Oh, definitely. I think it's coincidental that just 3 days after the Bloomberg article, the Australian government, as a result of some of the discussions with the US and the UK government around critical mineral supply, announces that they're earmarking $2 billion for critical minerals and rare earths in particular. So I think it's a real global realisation that this sector is extremely important to the world as it comes out of post-COVID recovery, particularly in manufacturing, and projects like Arafura's few and far between. And certainly we are one of the very few projects globally that is shovel ready.
Is there an expectation from it's all well and good the OEMs recognizing there's going to be shortages of this stuff, and as you say, we've all seen these kind of chip shortages causing huge delays in delivery of cars around the world, but including my daughter's. But the fact that I think people believe that some of that $2 billion is earmarked for your project, are they right?
Yeah, look, the Australian government gave us 2 letters of support. They're both conditional and non-binding at this point in time, but it's fair to say that the $200 million that Export Finance Australia earmarked for us would potentially come out of that $2 billion fund.
Any more?
Well, we'll work on that, but we've got a letter at the moment in our hand that says 200 million plus another 100 million from the Northern Australian Infrastructure Fund. And what we're doing, we're going to use this as a cornerstone to build our debt package together, such that in combination with our offtakes into foreign jurisdictions, being the EU, South Korea, and Japan, potentially bringing in the ECA funding from those countries as well to sit alongside the Australian government. And I think this is, a key message that the Australian government's trying to send to the rest of the world, that we are doing what we can. We're earmarking funding for these projects. We know the world needs these projects. This is what we're doing. What are you guys doing about it?
And I want to be clear, because politics speak is very confusing at times. This $2 billion, you're saying it may take into account the already 200 they've committed to you, and obviously the additional 100 that may be wrapped in. Is it just the Australian government wrapping up everyone else's budgets and putting out a statement, or do you think they're separate?
No, I think they're separate, and the reason being is that historically they put about $4 billion into Export Finance Australia, which was linked back to defence funding. This is clearly reshuffling the deck of cards, I guess, and putting $2 billion of that funding plus a bit extra specifically earmarked for critical materials and more specifically rare earths.
You've got to love an Aussie politician. Right, okay, so we know there's money around. That's the key point here. The other thing is the fact that the Aussie government is in talks with the UK and the US around rare earths in a broader context, like working collaboratively for ex-China production and supply. So what can you tell us there? Have you been involved in any of those conversations, or are you reading about it like us?
Oh, no, certainly. The Australian government set up the Critical Minerals Facilitation Office a couple of years ago, and we've been in regular contact with them and with other government agencies to make sure that they understand from an industry perspective exactly what's needed and what's required. And I'd like to think that some of the recent government announcements, particularly around the funding, have been as a direct result of our interaction with government. The next step is obviously to work on our offtakes and getting credible offtakes. And as you alluded to with the semiconductors at the start of this discussion, certainly the auto sector has really woken up to the fact that they need to secure long-term critical mineral supply from sustainable, reliable sources. And we are seeing a lot of interest in our company, in our product, almost to the point where some are also talking about potentially strategic equity involvement at some point in time.
Well, we talked about that last time out, right? So what I want to understand is, has the recent interest, I know it's only a couple of weeks, but certainly the announcement by the Aussies and their discussions with the UK and the US, has that accelerated any of those conversations? Has anyone started putting numbers on the table? Have you got any more certainty over these offtake and strategic conversations as a result?
But we're at a point where we're talking volumes and price in terms of our offtakes. And some of them are also now talking potentially around equity investment as well, to secure their longer term offtakes at reasonable prices. I think the other, it's not just the government announcements. I think the fact that there's been such strong EV growth this year, in a year where, the world's been turned upside down, that really, I think the Made in China 2025 strategy is kicking in, where China is set to become a net importer of NdPr in the next 2 years. And I think that the automakers in particular are starting to realise they need to do something about it. And when you look around the world, there's limited supply opportunities for projects that are ready to go, and of significant volume, such as Arafura. So I think that's combination of all of that is probably bringing it all together.
Okay, so in terms of you remaining in control of your own destiny here, we're talking ex-China, we're talking China as a net importer. You've got conversations going on with Western governments to secure their own supply chains. Does that bring you the competitive tension that you need to negotiate, first of all? And the second point is, are you under any pressure to not supply into China?
We're not under any pressure at all to not supply to China. It's always been our business model, though, to try and fund this project using offtake partners in traditional Western countries and our traditional trading partners. And this was a deliberate, strategy from Arafura's perspective, that we didn't. China produces 85% of the world's rare earths. We don't want to compete with China in its own backyard. And so we identified that, rest of the world supply needs producers like Arafura. And so that's always been our model, but it doesn't preclude us from selling to China. I think the other thing we're also seeing at the moment is the NdPr price has been sitting above $90 a kilo for quite some time, and we haven't seen sustainable prices like this for quite some time either. And most analysts globally would say that new projects need about $65 a kilo to get them funded. So I think that's also adding to the renewed interest in us. We're not under any direct, obviously there's a window of opportunity, and these windows don't last forever. So when you asked, are we under any pressure to execute? No, we're not. We'd obviously would like it for our shareholders to get the funding solution resolved and give the market certainty that the project can be funded. But we also have a number of technical programs running in the background, front-end engineering and design, all that sort of stuff, which even if we had all the money in the world, we wouldn't be able to fast-track that. That's just something that's going to take some time. And we're still targeting FID by about the middle of next year.
Okay, so with the technical programs, how much longer do you need there? Obviously, FID middle to end of next year, depending how it all goes. That's the moment that any strategic partner would actually say, "Well, here's the money. We can be subject to between now and then, but that's when you get the money. I think the market wants to see, and you can probably tell from the reaction of the Bloomberg article, which mentioned you, if I remember correctly, and the Aussie government announcement too, that people want you to get the money sorted now. So even if you got a subject to kind of document, that would give the market some comfort that you're in control. So are you going to be able to deliver that?
We're certainly targeting having something along those lines before the end of the year. But, how long is a piece of string? I can't control the procurement departments of significantly large billion-dollar industries. We are certainly pushing. We think that there's a lot of interest there that may allow that to eventuate. And certainly if it could eventuate, I think you're right. I think the market would respond favourably towards that.
Is the Aussie government now, with this article, it's mentioned numbers, and I suspect Aussie politicians love a headline, it's great for votes, but are they also proposing through these discussions with the UK and the US to help you? Have you been called in? Have you been put forward by them as a project that strategic partners could get involved with? Are you getting any outside help here?
Oh, definitely. Look, we're working with a number of Australian government agencies in particular. As I said, the Critical Minerals Facilitation Office, there's Austrade, which its mandate is to bring businesses together in foreign jurisdictions. So, we're certainly working closely with the Australian government, a number of key ministers and their departments for all those things that you just mentioned.
Okay. Look, I just want to kind of hone in on the money side of things. So it's like you're saying you're a little bit more confident than we spoke last time. Sounds like it's moving at a slightly faster pace, but you're not necessarily 100% controlled in terms of the timing there. That's what I'm hearing, right? Mm-hmm. So noted, and maybe you can come back on when things start moving there. But on the project front, you talked about there's a few more technical processes need to be resolved before you get through to FID. So is anything changed there? Anything slowing you down? Any problems we need to be aware of?
No, not at all. Since we last spoke, obviously we raised the capital at that point in time. Since then, we've appointed Hatch as our hydrometallurgical specialists to undertake the front-end engineering and design work. That is probably a 6 to 9 month exercise, which has already commenced. As we get growing confidence in the engineering, we'll start talking to constructors such that, when we are FID ready this time next year, that the constructors are on board and aligned with the engineering. So it should be a seamless transition. The ultimate outcome from the front-end engineering and design process is to actually get a fixed price EP or EPC contract, which is something that through our discussions with banks in particular and also the government agencies, they would like to see a more definitive fixed price EPC style contract, given the uncertainty or the perceived technical risks in critical minerals projects, given that there's only one other project really outside of China.
Brilliant. Well, Gavin, I think it's as simple as that. That's all I wanted to understand. So how things are moving along. Any barriers? Obviously, you raised that money. That frees you up to do everything you need to do. Stay in touch. Let us know how you get on, okay?
Yep, will do. Thanks very much for having me.